Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Unfiltered on Wonderful Machine's Instagram account. We're going to be talking with Paul Quitoriano today, a Brooklyn-based photographer who has got a lot to talk about, of course, and some of that is related to the protests going on surrounding the George Floyd killing and other unjust killings of African-American people by police officers. And we're also going to be talking to Paul about his COVID-19 quarantine experience. He has a lot of experience with the virus and living with it, and also doing projects in Brooklyn while dealing with it and also surrounding it itself. So thank you for coming back and joining us this week. We took a break last week, of course, to focus on the protests that were going on not only around the country but around the world, and we will certainly make sure to keep on covering those things. But we're also going to discuss, and so happy to have him on board as well. And Paul should be with us in just a second again. Brooklyn-based photographer. There he is. Paul, how you doing?
Yo, what's up, man? I'm hanging in there. How are you doing?
Good. Good to see you. Good to talk with you. I know that we were supposed to do this last week, but of course we didn't for obvious reasons. And both of us being based in pretty big cities, in Brooklyn, in New York, myself in Philadelphia, we have seen a lot that's been going on around our cities, but around the world as well. What has the last week or so been like for you?
It's been wild. We've been out there every day doing some kind of protest, whether it's a vigil or a bike ride or some big meeting at the Barclays Center. I'm going out there strictly as just a supporter, as a person, and not as a photographer, which I think sometimes family members will get into a weird loophole. It's like, oh, you're just out there for work. And I was like, no, this is totally separate. And this is like for our people. You've been out there?
Absolutely. I certainly have. Yeah, I was there Monday and Tuesday of last week, and then Saturday, of course, the big ones, not only in our cities, but around the world as well. And yeah, it wasn't a case of going for work or anything like that. Not that I would be. I think that's an interesting thing for you to point out. You didn't, I imagine you didn't bring your camera, really take any pictures. You were just out there supporting the cause.
Yeah, like I'll snap a few photos with my phone and upload stuff to Instagram just to show my support, but specifically having talks with like family members about it not being a work thing.
Right.
Right. And these are all the hard talks that we have to have. And living here, there's no way around it. You have to kind of be there.
No question. And you are Brooklyn based, and were the protests coming right to you? Were they on the streets that you live on, or did you have to go a little bit to go join in? What was that like?
Maybe like 2 avenues away, they'll be marching down there, but they're so spread out that I'll kind of just go to each and any of them. And yeah, it's been a bit wild. And even the idea of storming Manhattan Bridge last week and just how heavy like people are documenting it, like we're all breaking the law. Like I'm trying to interested in the repercussions of all that. So doing my best to not photograph explicit faces and just knowing your rights as like a journalist, going to journalism school and all that stuff. But that kind of goes out the window once the protest goes and gets a little wild. Yeah.
At that point, it's definitely just a case, there's not really a book that you can reference in regards to this stuff. So great to see you out there, certainly. And you mentioned going to journalism school and also talking to your family. Can you give us a little bit of background on kind of how you got started and the different things that you kind of find your childhood and your upbringing?
Oh, sure. I'm originally from San Francisco, California, and I went to San Francisco State and I studied photojournalism. So a lot of my roots are in like visual storytelling. But after moving to New York for an internship, I started freelancing for like the Village Voice and the Wall Street Journal. And they give you just these kind of like catch-all assignments, like go out and photograph like a weather feature, or go out and photograph like these puppies, or go out and photograph a protest. So with all that, eventually I got put on a food feature to go photograph a restaurant, photograph some food, and then somehow that just became my thing. Like I'm not quite sure, so other publications started to pick me up, but only having me on for still life and food stuff. So it slowly took me away from journalism.
Interesting. Yeah, because the things that we're going to talk about regarding your recent work are food-based, so that makes that makes perfect sense. One with the New York Times, one a more personal project. But I guess growing up in San Francisco, did you do a lot of cooking? Obviously, food's a big part of everybody's life, but did you see yourself as a food photographer when you started in school and kind of going that path?
Oh, absolutely not. I just wanted to make like portraits, and it's weird how getting into food put me in a place to get portraits of people I wanted to photograph, because I've always been into like eating. Like I moved to New York because I just want to eat food. So being able to successfully and make like nice photos of food, you can now have access to like chefs and maybe like other celebrity entities. And that's kind of my weird backdoor into being able to photograph portraits plus food.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And you mentioned wanting to start as like a portrait photographer, and one of the projects that we're going to talk about does feature a good bit of portraiture. So I guess it's nice to be able to combine the two things with different assignments that you've been doing.
Yeah, definitely. So like since COVID has kind of jumped off, it's been pretty quiet. Like there hasn't been a lot of things that I've been up to, but I have had a few assignments come in through the New York Times, and it's kind of given me a way back into a little bit of journalism, and it's a good itch to scratch. So a lot of the work I've been doing has been about essential workers or old businesses that are being able to do like a takeout delivery system with the COVID. But being in Manhattan with a mask on and having nobody around is like the most bizarre feeling. I'm sure you feel the same way, like in Philadelphia.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing or video footage of like it's somewhere on like the Upper West Side or something on like a Thursday at 11 a.m. This was like in March or April, and nobody was there. And
Yeah.
it was so eerie, and I can imagine it's the same on the different avenues in Brooklyn. It's such an odd feeling.
Oh, definitely. And when you do run into someone else, like they're wearing a mask, and just the whole anonymity of everything now is very, very bizarre. So even I had to go out and photograph a few essential businesses in Soho, and part of the story was photographing portraits of the people that are out there still working, but they're all masked up. So it's an interesting concept when you have to direct someone to take their portrait, but you can't see half their face. So
right. I guess you really got to look at the eyes at that point. Go off of that part.
And that's it. I was like, are you smiling? I have no idea what's going on down there. And are you supposed to smile for a photo like this? So it's a little bit different, but somehow marrying my food photography plus journalism is kind of what I've been up to lately.
Right. I think, for a lot of us, it's like that journalism aspect of like seeing what's going on, recording what's going on, or just knowing what's going on is so very much at the forefront. And it's interesting because, Paul, we were talking maybe a couple of months ago. I mentioned doing a personal project called Quarantine Meals, which is on our site. You can see the story on Wonderful Machines website. And you mentioned that you think that you and your roommate had COVID-19. Now, I don't know if you confirmed that, but you certainly were sick for a while. Can you tell us about that experience, just dealing with that for a couple of weeks?
Well, since we last spoke, I have tested positive for antibodies.
Okay.
So I did have COVID. And I was sick for about 2 weeks, and it's the worst because in the middle of all this, we're working on our own kind of quarantine project, documenting every single food item or dish that we're eating as kind of a way to show how we feel over the course of the entire kind of quarantine, which is phase one is coming up pretty soon, which feels surreal.
Right.
But yeah, so like I'll show you some photos and let's see if I can.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing that I really like about this project, and you can explain it too, is kind of, especially when you're really sick, one of those days you don't want to make anything. You don't have the energy to make anything. So it's going to be a bag of Cheetos or something like this.
There it is, like the bag of Cheetos. And it kind of just gives you a sense of how we're feeling without necessarily saying how we're feeling. So if it's like a bag of Cheetos day, like maybe you're feeling a little lazy or a little sick. And then we'll go in and maybe make like a bigger dish. Like this is like a traditional arroz caldo, which is like almost like a Filipino rice porridge. And then you can kind of tell when I get really lazy or I'm not feeling well, and bam, like here comes It's just a burrito, and we've been managing to like show off an array of things. And my cousin Dominique, she cooks, I would say, like 80% of the time, but you can definitely tell when it's my food because it starts looking really weird.
It's too
So
funny.
she's really like, yeah, the bread and butter of this thing, but you can tell when it's like my turn. So I was like, let's just do a pizza.
Right, right. And you mentioned this also in when we were talking, but the background is like a bright color, and that style is kind of it's contrasting with what's going on. Can you talk about the impetus behind using that color palette and that style?
Well, I essentially have enough stuff in my small apartment to build out these studio sets, and one day we just kind of wanted to develop some kind of normalcy, or like a routine with our days, because if I'm not working, I'm kind of just sitting around.
Right.
And it's fun to try to come up with things, and you'll see like we can't just keep slamming pizza and meatballs all the time. So maybe like my cousin Dominique will go on a diet, and you'll see like, okay, she had a snack, and it's just 10 almonds. Like, so they're
Oh,
all
wow.
like a direct reflection of like how we're feeling. And when we both do get sick for 2 weeks, it started to become more like in this world. It's like, all right, we're drinking smoothies and we're taking vitamins, and it's bizarre to get to cook food for yourself and then get COVID, because one of the symptoms of having COVID is you lose your sense of taste and smell.
Right. And and I take it that you went through all of those symptoms. Like, yeah, I think that's part of the piece as well. Just having to like make food, and I think your roommate walked in, right? She was like, "It smells great in here," and you're like, "Does it?" I had no
I was like, I
idea.
can't smell anything. I was like, oh, I think we're like really sick, you guys.
Yeah. Right, right. So after those 2 weeks, what was the kind of the recovery period like? Just directly after that, and at what point did you kind of start yourself again?
I would say after the 2 weeks, after the initial 2 weeks, I started to slowly regain my sense of taste, but things would still feel a bit off. Like sleeping is really hard during COVID, and it just kind of melts your brain a little bit. So one of the weird side effects is you kind of become dumb for a while. And
Interesting.
I just, like if we try to do this interview during that time, there's no way I'd be able to articulate the sentence.
Right. Yeah, I was talking with a friend who mentioned having similar symptoms, and they mentioned having a lot of like fever, a lot of like
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
extra explicit. Dreams are going to be weird anyway, but even more so. Was that the case for you?
Oh, I've definitely been a nightmare factory for the past 10 weeks.
Oh wow.
I think it's a mix of like just the way the quarantine is, but also when you're sick and the chills, and a regular fever dream is already hard, but just 2 weeks in a row of it is pretty brutal.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. And even as you recover from this, it's good that you're getting a chance to kind of to go out and do some work that is client based. The New York Times is somebody that you work with quite a bit. Can you tell us about your relationship with them, when that started, and kind of what it's been like just working with them over the last couple of years, decade or so?
Oh yeah, sure. How did I start working for the New York? I started working for the New York Times in 2014. I I actually don't remember. It wasn't through a traditional means. Like I didn't have a portfolio review. I didn't send a book. I think I got paired with a writer friend, Charlotte Druckman, and she pitched her own story, and I did her photography for her. And it was a spec assignment, and then I got in through that, and ever since then they've been giving me like pretty fun assignments.
Nice. Yeah. That's
And it still has the journalism kind of base. Like we do a lot of setup portraits and setup food stuff, but a lot of times we're just showing up to someone's house or a restaurant, not really knowing what it's going to be and not having an idea to scout it. So trying to be able to fly by the seat of your pants is, I think, a skill that I've finally kind of been more comfortable with, and being less anxious and less afraid showing up to every kind of difficult space.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess as someone who has lived in an urban environment now for a while, and the New York Times assignment that we're going to talk about is certainly related to this, but you come up to someone's apartment, and if they're in Manhattan, it's going to be pretty small. And so you have to kind of work around the tight squeeze, especially when you're photographing food as you do. So that must have been an interesting challenge to navigate, especially starting out with these assignments.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There's so many different kinds of New York apartments. And if you're lucky, you'll get a big loft with a ton of windows. But for the most part, that's not going to happen. And New York City is known for having your living room, your kitchen, your bathroom be the exact same thing. So those tight spaces, we've had to like, as I've been going, I've been learning how to like relight things for space. Because sometimes I'll bring like an Octabank or like some kind of like lighting setup. But some spaces do not lend themselves to that. Like you can't put up a stand and a tripod and a this and a that and have a whole computer system. So being able to work with a really tight kit now has kind of become my thing, which is also good just for carrying and lugging a bunch of stuff around all the time.
Yeah, and I imagine if you're going from Brooklyn to Manhattan, are you taking a car? Or are you usually using public transportation like
I'm
the
usually
subway?
using public transportation. Everything I need now can just fit in a backpack.
Oh, good, good. But that takes a while, I'm sure, to like hone it down. Like, here are the essentials that I need.
Definitely.
Makes perfect with that, right?
Oh, definitely. Because especially in the beginning when I was just kind of more like less confident than I would bring every single piece of equipment. And then over time, you notice like, I never use this. I never use this. I never use this. So I've kind of figured out what my style is and what I need to accomplish like those looks. And it's surprisingly not that much stuff.
Right. I'm sure, like, you feel like, especially that first assignment, you're like, I need to bring everything just in case, maybe even two of something, just in
Oh,
case
yeah. I would bring a friend just to help me out.
Yeah. So one of those assignments was, I believe it's called One Good Meal,
Mm-hmm.
the New York Times. And this was really cool because you were talking to other creatives, and those are people who have not only busy schedules, but weird schedules. And they kind of have to learn how to cook for themselves in a way where they don't have to spend too much time. They're comfortable with it, but they also need to get themselves a good, healthy, hearty meal. And I think that the story was really compelling. What did you like about covering that story?
I liked it because it's not about, for the most part, it's not about being a chef. I think it's a very intimate look at what people cook. Like a lot of times they're artists or dancers, or maybe like people in the fashion world or writers. So not necessarily like chefy folks. And a lot of times, like their dishes are very personal and have a very meaningful story. And I think it's just a good way to show that we're all kind of disconnected in the food that we eat. But the best part for me is after we spend 2, sometimes 3 hours together, the meal is done, and it's generally just me and them. Maybe it's me and them and a PR person. Then we just kind of sit there and eat the meal together.
Very cool. And yeah, I'm sure there were a number of good meals. The photos are terrific. We'll have this story up on our site soon as well. But did you have a favorite meal? As a person of Indian origin, I love seeing the biryani. So I'm going to start with that.
That was up there. That was the last one we did, and that was right before COVID started. Like I haven't done one since COVID, the quarantine starts. That was the very last one I did. And that one was really challenging because, as you know, like a biryani is, I don't know, 1,000 ingredients, like something like it's so no, it's ballpark. It's a lot of stuff, and there's just such complex flavor you have to build. And if you can like nail that, it's really, really good. So I definitely housed a bunch of that with Atish. Like.
Very cool. And then there are plenty of other ones that you mentioned. But yeah, discuss some more.
It's mostly the stuff I've never had before. For the most part, some people will make like dishes I've known or have actually tried. So if I get to try like a new thing, then I think that's when I get more excited. I photographed a noodle kugel, which I had no clue what that was, from Sierra Tishkart, and it was somehow mac and cheese, but as a dessert. I'm not 100% what the ingredients are, but it was somehow a hearty dessert, and I've never tasted anything like it, and it was amazing.
That does sound good. I always ask our members who do food assignments, did you get to eat the food? And not only did you get to eat it, but you get to enjoy it with the person who made it. It sounds like the perfect food assignment, honestly.
Yeah, because in some cases, well, some will do like more magazine style, more like food style shoots. Sometimes I don't get to eat that food. Things are purposefully undercooked or unseasoned to look a certain way, but for this stuff, everything that we're photographing is real, and I do eat. So my portfolio is somehow a weird mix of everything I've eaten in the past like 5 years.
Right.
And so yeah, the QT digest becomes that now, but
Yeah.
it's I'm cooking or what my cousin Dominique is cooking.
Have you gotten better, do you think, at cooking just from photographing a lot of it and from working kind of in that part of the industry?
Absolutely not. I kind of know more just knowledge wise, but in terms of execution, it's never quite what I expect to be. I can make a handful of things, but for the most part, I'm a pretty simple dude. I like to go out to eat. I like someone to make it for me. I miss
You and me,
tacos much.
you and me. Well, hey, again, that's why that's a great assignment. You're like, not only are paid, is it based, but you're getting yourself a meal as well at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
that's terrific. And then, are there some other things? I know you mentioned kind of talking or going with a mask to others, to small businesses. Or is there other work that you've been doing during quarantine, like since you've recovered? And then, what has that been like, kind of getting back into the swing of things?
I've had a few other assignments where I had to photograph a few businesses that we all missed, and it's more of the same of photographing sad, empty buildings to tell a story. And yeah, but since then, the narrative. So we just looked at a bunch of colorful photographs of Cheetos and quarantine food, and since the protests have been going, it felt strange to keep the digest going and have it still be about colorful, bright, pretty food with so much in the world. So now the digest is kind of, the narrative has shifted a little bit, and I haven't cooked the last 3 or 4 meals, but instead we're going out into Brooklyn and photographing and highlighting Black-owned businesses.
I gotcha.
So we've changed kind of the color palette because it's just to show our own support, but also still eat like delicious things like codfish balls, patties. You have like oxtail and the curry goat, your catfish sandwiches, and these are all local small businesses. Like in this time, like if that's a way I can show some support, because since we last spoke, like T Magazine for the New York Times, they blasted out a little Instagram post about the digest itself, and it's gotten some legs under it now. Now there's more eyes on it, so to be able to show that we actually like do care and like have, and to spotlight Black-owned businesses locally, like we can actually use our what started off as a kind of funny thing to do to turn it into make a point and support our local people.
Definitely. That reminds me, one of my first times going to Brooklyn, I remember having Oxtail, and it was a small Black-owned business, and it was some of the best food that I've ever had in my entire life. It was just sublime.
It's fantastic. So if I'm able to get eyes on those businesses and have someone go like help them out, that's kind of the goal here. And I don't know because how the diet just grows. We're kind of just rolling with the punches a little bit, because one day COVID will be over, and then what happens? Do I keep it up, or do we have it be this little time capsule? So thinking about post-COVID photography has been on my mind a lot, because I'm not really sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think part of that too is the when is so unknown. Will be, I can't say when, and so like you gotta like mentally prepare yourself for it. And what has that been like? Just kind of thinking about the future, however many months it might be down the road.
It's bizarre, because I know a lot of my work revolves around restaurants, and a lot of my work revolves around going to strangers' houses.
Oh, I'll ask it again. What is it?
Sorry, it's cutting in and out. And just meeting people is a big part of my job. And now that we have to be all messed up for however long, I'm just interested in what assignments are going to start looking like for me. And there've been a few other like smaller commercial jobs that have come across my desk, but everything is to be determined. Like it's strange to build a bid and build out a deck and talk about like, oh, like I think this is the direction we should go, and it's like, great,
Hmm.
when are we going to do that? I was like, who knows? Like, when is the studio going to open? Like, when our store is going to be open again to gather resources for shoots? So I'm very interested to see what happens, but I honestly have no clue. So all I can do is just kind of study and just like try to stay sharp, but just kind of rolling with the punches as we've kind of all been.